My name is Alan Burt, and welcome to The Commerce Lab, the show for growth-minded e-commerce entrepreneurs who want to scale their business. After having worked with dozens of successful brands through my firm Blue Stout, I've been fortunate enough to see what it takes to successfully scale a physical products business into the 8 figures and beyond. On this show, we'll dive deep into the e-commerce economy to analyze the cutting-edge strategies of today's top-performing brands and the industry leaders who are engineering their growth. If you want actionable advice and tactics you can implement into your business today, then keep listening. If you want to join a mastermind of other entrepreneurs and leading brand owners, then join us in the Commerce Lab official community on Facebook or visit thecommercelab.com. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Commerce Lab. And today we're going to get very tactical. Today we're going to be covering one of my favorite topics, frankly, because we see it as being one of the most effective and highest ROI. And when I say ROI, I mean return on investment strategies that we see for our clients. And that strategy is called lifecycle email marketing. Now, if you're listening to this, most likely means you know what email marketing is, right? You're probably an e-commerce entrepreneur already. Maybe you're an owner, maybe you're an executive, maybe you work within a larger brand. And you already understand how important email marketing is to your business and how much potential there is to scale revenue with it in the future. However, even today, for most brands that we speak with, either brands that we're onboarding or brands that we're doing consulting with, are doing email wrong or just have not optimized it as well as they could to drive as much revenue through it as they should be. So if your version of email marketing right now within your brand and your business entails, sending out or blasting your entire list multiple times a week with sales offers or product launches, then I guarantee there's a better way for you to do it that's going to bring in more revenue and not burn out your list over time, which is one of the biggest issues we see with brands that are scaling very quickly. They'll drive a ton of revenue through email, but their list burns out in about 6 months, or their open rates start to drop dramatically because they're not doing things like segmenting correctly, and they start to fall in the spam folders. So today we're going to talk about all of that and lay out a strategy for you that's going to help you bring your email marketing up to par. Now, when we say effective email strategy, what we mean by that is one that's going to consistently generate predictable revenue, and ideally revenue that's going to be anywhere from 25 to 40% of your total monthly sales. 30% is sort of that ballpark we're going to be looking for, and we're going to talk about that a lot during the training today. And the goal of this is to do that while not burning out your list. And there's some very specific strategies and ways you should be looking at how you send and when you send, depending upon the life cycle of that customer and where they are in their purchase process with you in order to make it more effective. So what we have today is actually a pre-recorded training that Dean, who is our head of email marketing at Blue Stout, and myself pulled together for the team at BigCommerce. And BigCommerce asked us essentially to pull together a very quick but high impact training. It's really only about 20 minutes long for their store merchants, showing them how to set up and think through and optimize an effective lifecycle email marketing campaign for their store and their brand. So today is obviously just audio because you're listening to the podcast. But if you want to actually watch the full video presentation with the slides and the visual examples, you can head over to our private Facebook group that we've created called The Commerce Lab. So just go to Facebook and search for The Commerce Lab and it'll pop up and then just request to join. And we'll also make sure we link to that in the show notes. So if you want to go and find the video in our Facebook group, you can do it there as well. So a few things that we talk about during this training is, first off, we talk about why and how you should be timing your emails based upon the life cycle of your customer. We really break down what is that life cycle, what are the steps your customer is taking when they're interacting with you, and what email should you be sending to them at each one of those stages. We talk about how to optimize both your automated campaigns. So these are the campaigns that are firing automatically at different steps of the life cycle, as well as manual campaigns. So these are the things that most of you are probably already doing now, like newsletters or sales promotions or product launches, et cetera. Then we're going to go into metrics. We're going to talk about what should your open rates look like across your campaigns, click rates, how much revenue should you be driving from those manual campaigns versus your automated campaigns. The reason why the metrics are so important is because it's going to help you determine what's your baseline right now, how well are you doing, and then where do you need to be placing your focus in order to improve the metrics that are underperforming. And ultimately, that's what's going to drive more revenue. We talk about segmentation, how to think through segmentation. Segmentation, I think, is one of the most poorly and underutilized secrets of email marketing. It's something that most people are doing wrong. And we're going to talk about and break down some very easy ways to think through basic segmentation to get you started or to help you get back on track if you're doing it incorrectly. And then finally, we break down some really easy takeaways. So some very specific tactics that you can take away, start implementing literally today if you're sending out emails today. So we're going to be talking about subject lines, how to write really effective subject lines, and then also how to actually design the content that goes into those emails to make sure you're garnering the highest level of engagement in those emails when people actually do open them. So for anybody who is looking to do a better job with email, knows that you're leaving money on the table by not doing things like optimizing your automated campaigns, and you know your open rates are too low and you need to get them up, highly recommend you listen to this episode. Again, it's very high impact, only about 20 or so minutes long, and you're going to get a lot out of it. And if you're looking for the visuals to go along with it, or if you'd rather just jump and actually watch the actual video, head over to our Facebook group, The Commerce Lab, and you can download the full video recording there. Hope you enjoy.
All right. How you guys doing? So you guys have Dean Dutro and Alan Burt here from Blue Stout, and we're here to talk to you guys about effective email marketing. And essentially, BigCommerce asked us to put together a short little training. So we're going to keep this really effective. We're going to try to keep it to about 15, 20 minutes or so. And essentially, we're going to break down for you guys a proven process that we've seen work across a number of companies and for our clients for setting up really effective email marketing programs that follow what we call lifecycle email marketing. And so what we're going to do today is give you guys a breakdown of what that means, as well as some very actionable tactics you guys can take away after the training to start implementing into your own businesses. And if you stick around to the very end, and again, we're only going to be here for about 15 or 20 minutes, but if you stick around to the very end, we're also going to show you guys an opportunity for how to actually get some free help with this. So if you see anything here that looks interesting to you, make sure you stick around to the end. We're going to show you a way that you can actually talk to somebody about getting help implementing this for free. So stick around to the end. Dean, you ready to go, man?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I'm highly caffeinated, so slow me down if we're going too fast. All right. So first off, let's talk about who this is really for. So if you're on this training, we're making the assumption that you're in the e-commerce space of some sort, right? You're either a founder, an owner, a CEO, maybe you're the GM of a brand, maybe you're running marketing, the marketing team, or the sales team. But what we're going to be talking about today is specific to setting up an effective email lifecycle marketing system for your brand that is selling typically physical products online. You could be selling information products, but most of the clients we see this work really well for tend to be in the physical product space. So hopefully that's why you're here. So to really dig in, what I want to start with is, because I think this is a term that most brand owners and merchants aren't familiar with, which is this idea of life cycle email marketing, right? Like everybody knows what email marketing is, this idea of sending emails to your customers in the hopes that they're going to click on those emails, see your sales promotions, come back to your store and buy a product. But where a lot of brands are really missing the boat is this in this concept of building your email system in your email marketing plan around the life cycle of the customer. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, because that's where you're going to be able to see the most gain. So what I want to do is I want to break down for you guys what this means, and then we're going to let Dean talk about some very tactical ways to get this implemented, and we'll break down exactly what you should be setting up to do this. So to set the stage a little bit, lifecycle email marketing is all about sending emails to your customers at the critical points of their customer journey. And the entire reason you're doing this is to help them take that next important step forward towards a purchase. So you should be thinking about email not just as these one-off massive sends that you're sending to your entire list, but really as a way to layer it on top of what you're already doing with your customer's journey and using email to push that customer and nudge that customer towards the next step in their path towards a purchase or towards a second purchase, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll show you what I mean by this. So if you think about specifically what the journey of your customer is, typically you're pulling somebody in from, whether it be an Instagram ad, Facebook ad, Google Shopping, whatever it may be, somebody's coming and having a very first visit with your brand, right? So this is a cold traffic visitor that you eventually want to turn into a customer. So maybe they show up, maybe they poke around a little bit, then they leave. Then maybe they come back a second time and they start actually viewing product. So they're actually digging around through your product catalog. They're actually, maybe even potentially looking at sizing, digging into your tabs, understanding about those products. And then let's say they leave again. And then eventually they come back, start browsing again. This time they get really into a product and they add it to their cart, right? But maybe they decide it's not the right time to buy, so they'll leave and then come back maybe a couple weeks later and actually make that first purchase. So the point of getting a first-time visitor from a cold advertising or a piece of social content all the way to a first purchase isn't necessarily going to be a one-hit wonder. Sure, there's going to be a certain percentage of your visitors that are always going to buy on that first visit, but it's going to be a very, very small percentage. So what you should be thinking about is how do we take this customer and nurture them into the point of making their first purchase and then coming back and making second purchases and recurring purchases down the road. And this is really where lifecycle email marketing comes into play, because what you can do is start layering automated emails into this customer journey in a way that's going to nudge them towards that very first purchase. So for example, somebody comes to the very first visit, you can get them to sign up for your newsletter or your welcome series and send them a series of emails that's going to push them towards looking at specific product. Same thing when they browse that first product. You can trigger a browse abandonment email series that's going to understand what product they're reviewing and put them through another campaign that's going to actually push them towards making a purchase. Same thing when you get to cart. If they abandon that cart, you can send them an abandoned cart series, so on and so forth. And then after they make that first purchase, you can actually then start to send them email campaigns that are targeted towards the level of engagement and the types of products they bought, etc. So the idea with life cycle email marketing is this whole concept of layering email at each stage of the customer journey to push customers, I don't want to say more rapidly, but kind of more rapidly through the customer journey process, but also layering in these additional nurturing points to get somebody revved up about your brand, really in touch with the brand and ready to buy. And I'm sure Dean has his thoughts on this, but Dean, what do you think? Do you think that's a good summary of it?
Yeah, that's excellent. And really, you're on point. What email does is it accelerates that first purchase cycle, right? So
yeah,
if you're just running ads, via social or Google or whatever, you have to wait for people to click on it again. Where with email, you can, target them with a similar message to what you're running through ads. So they're more likely to see an ad and an email, which makes them more likely to make that first purchase down the road.
100%. We call it nurturing touch points when we talk to clients. It's this idea around, on average, you probably need 5 to 15 touch points with your customers. Have 5 to 15 touch points with your brand before they feel comfortable buying. And the more expensive and the more complex the brand or product, the more touch points they require. And email is a great way to manufacture those touch points, right? And if you can layer that with ads, it actually makes your ad campaigns more effective. So it's a really, really effective way of increasing site conversion, increasing your revenue from email campaigns. And it's all about timing it to where that customer is in their journey with you. So I think the concept's pretty easy to grasp, but at the end of the day, how do you actually start to get this implemented? So what I want to do now is I'm going to let Dean dig in a little bit on this and talk to you guys about, now that you understand the concept, how do you start to put these strategies into place? And when you're thinking about your effective email marketing strategy and putting together a life cycle program, what does that actually look like? So Dean, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, I'll take it from here. So really, when you think about email marketing, a lot of what we've been talking about from a life cycle perspective is what we call automations or flows or drip campaigns, things like that. And what Alan just talked about, like your welcome flow, your browse, your cart, your post-purchase flows, those are all automated campaigns. So we'll start there first, and then later we'll kind of touch on like the manual campaigns and how to layer that into your automations later.
Yeah. And I think the automation stuff is incredibly important because it's what most people don't do. If you're thinking about like your standard newsletters and and email blasts you're sending right now, those would be sort of your manual campaigns. The automations is the piece that we see, at least from my experience, I see the most people really missing out on because it's not something that people get taught. It's not something you just kind of know offhand.
Yeah. And so, from that, what I've seen a lot of people do or kind of different companies do is they'll set up like templates in whatever email software they're using, and they'll use the templates provided by, that company and kind of set it. And they may see like 1% to 2% of their total revenue coming from this. And so they're kind of like, how is this even possible to get to, 10, 15, 20% from automations? And that's where this like idea of customer lifecycle comes into play. And so what we, kind of want to do is think about like your product and the different stages, just like you would in a Facebook ad or, Instagram post or something like that. Like, what kind of messaging do you want to give them throughout each of these touch points, right? If they're a prospect, how do you like a welcome series, for example, what do you want to say in that welcome series? You want to talk about your brand, you want to have some customer service, and maybe you want to have a promotion, right? So every kind of flow is what we call it. And we call these your base level flows, welcome, a browse, abandoned cart, new customer, repeat, VIP, win back. And each of these will have a little bit different content that's customized based off where a person is. So a welcome series, for example, may be, 4 or 5 emails. And each of those emails is going to have a different purpose, whether it's, telling someone, more about your brand, and having kind of a longer email, or just offering a simple discount, or maybe like asking why they haven't purchased. So you have this like combination and layering of customer service, brand indoctrination, and then different promos and sales as people escalate through the emails. And some of the things we kind of advise people is like, hey, your flows are always going to have higher open rates, higher click-through rates, and higher conversions typically than your campaigns, other than, some special holidays here and there. But we advise, 3 to 4 emails per flow. Timing is every couple of days, but you can really stretch out, those 4 emails into 2 or 3 weeks if you wanted. And then also making sure as you set these up that you're not like overlapping them. So someone shouldn't be getting like a welcome series email and a new customer series email at the same time, right? Because then it just kind of gets like the messaging is lost and it makes it seem, we don't kind of know what we're doing, if that makes sense. And your flows really should be not just about generating revenue, but also about collecting data to lead to successful campaigns later. And what I kind of mean by that, and Alan can maybe touch on this, is if we know that a customer, for example, is opening your emails but hasn't purchased, right? Let's say they've opened 3 or 4 emails but haven't purchased. Why would that be? And maybe it has to do with, they're not convinced yet about your product. Or maybe they just need a little bit extra of a discount. So you can use that data, customize it, and then create these campaigns, these targeted campaigns later that are going to get you to that 25, 30, 35% of email revenue on the back end.
Yeah. And I think it's something that most people who talked about this find interesting is that the automations, like these automated flows, should be your best performing emails, right? The open rates on these should be higher than the open rates on your manual, weekly or daily email campaigns that you're sending out, because A, they're more targeted to that customer at the point in the life cycle that they're at. So it's going to be more relevant. And B, you're actually able to do things like test these, right? You're actually able to refine them over time because you're putting people through the same flow versus just sending out one campaign, which gives you then the ability to dial it in and improve it, improve the subject lines, improve the offerings, the content within it. And so we're like, for example, when we set up these types of email marketing systems for clients, we focus, we spend an entire month focusing exclusively on flows because it should be your highest leverage in your email system.
Yeah, exactly. And the other kind of added benefit of the flows is that it's going to protect your list, right? So if you've got good open rates, you've got good click-through rates, people are purchasing, and that's all on kind of autopilot, like when you send that campaign for Black Friday to, 10, 15, 20,000 people or 100,000 or however many people on your list, you're more likely going to end up, in the tab you want to end up in and not in the spam box, because Google, Hotmail, Yahoo, Outlook, they all trust you now. They trust your domain. They know you're not just, spraying and praying. And that's going to have a huge long-term benefit to you that most people don't do.
Yeah, it kind of goes to this point of list health, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But it's a really good point, because it's an added benefit that I don't think a lot of people understand.
Yep.
All right, you want to talk about manual campaigns a bit?
Yeah. So we've kind of like talked mainly about flows, and a lot of questions we get are about like, hey, how many campaigns should I run? Like, what can I send in a campaign? Or hey, like, I don't have any blog content. What kind of content can I actually send out? And what we try to do is, list out what are the different types of campaigns that we have, right? How do we break that into categories to make it more manageable? And then come up with a sending strategy based off that. So what we do, are a couple of things, right? So first, figure out, what kind of blogs, newsletters, what kind of things can you recycle, right, to send out to new people on your list? Are there new reviews that you can send out? Are there any customer stories that you can send out? Are there like random days like, National Avocado Day that match with your brand where you can send something fun out, right? And so there's all sorts of like these creative ways to come up with a reason to email someone. And a lot of it can just be fun and playful, and other times it could be something, for Veterans Day, right? Where it's a little bit more serious, but still, you want to let people know your brand is into it. And you don't try to be a salesy, but you just kind of reach out to people. And that's kind of how you curate like a list of ideas. And what I found from like an 80-20 or 20-80 perspective is that around 6 to 10 campaigns per month, or about 2 per week, is going to net you the largest ROI if you have flows going as well. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, two per week is not that bad, right? Some people do 1 every day, which seems like a lot of work. But I think that if you do 2 per week that are targeted to people, you're going to see the best results. And that's what we've seen kind of across the board. Is that what you've kind of seen, Alan?
Yeah, 100%. And that's, that's what we always recommend for everybody that works with us. But the other thing I think that the note about that is that I think that sort of sweet spot of, call it 6 per 10. But if you're, something to be aware of is that if you're running more than that, or if even if you are running that 6 to 10 per month or more, you have to be really careful around who you're sending them to. Because I know a lot of people would think, 6 to 10 emails a month, let's, we send that to the whole list, right? And it's like, no, you actually, if you're going to be sending even that many emails, you need to be making sure that you are focusing that list within segments of your whole list. Like you're focusing those emails on specific segments of your list. And we'll talk about segmentation here in a second. But I think that's something to be really careful about is if you are sending a lot of email, you don't want to be sending all of that email to your entire list, because I guarantee there's different segments and groupings within that list that aren't going to engage, and it's going to end up hurting you in the long run. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And what will happen is your open rates across the board will drop. So even if you have the same amount of people that you're sending to, right, all things kind of being the same, if you're just sending to that same list, you may go from 25 to 30% or higher open rates, all of a sudden you're at 10 because you haven't segmented properly and set things up to target people, with what they're interested in.
So that's, I think, a really good segue to actually start talking about what we mean by segments. I think it's something that a lot of, when we start working with clients, and we onboard them out here at Blue Stout, one of the very first things we look to do with them is set up their flows to start, because the flows give you so much leverage. And the second piece with their manual campaigns is seeing what can we do with segmentations within your list, and let's look at the data within your list to determine who is best to send those emails to. So if you're sending, let's say, 2 a week, 8 a month, who in your list should get all 8? Who should just get 1 of those 8, right? And so what we like to do is look at, if you think of your whole email list as sort of like a pie, right? So like this pie chart on the left. Within that, by looking at your data, you should be able to see, what segment of your list is opening up, almost every single email you send, or who is opening up, 2 of those emails a month, or, who is, purchased a couple products and is opening up, a couple emails a month, right? So you can get even more advanced in those segmentations, especially if you're using a tool like Klaviyo, which is a great email software to manage your list and manage your segments. But not only should you be planning out the content that you're sending in those manual campaigns every month, but also what segments of your list are going to receive that content, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing with segmentation is that it can be really, really complex, right? Mm-hmm. So what I try to do is like break it down into like simple pieces, right? And you think about it, you have subscribers, then you have subscribers who are also customers. And each of those kind of two categories can be broken down into different engagement levels. Yep. So like here opens every email, that person should be receiving all of your emails that you send out for the most part until they stop opening, at which case they should automatically be put into a different segment. Maybe that following segment opens 2 emails a month, or maybe you only send to them once a week versus twice a week, right? And so you can kind of create a segmentation plan that will be the kind of like framework for your campaigns, so you know what type of content to send for the month. If you're like, hey, this group I haven't sent to, in over a month, maybe you call this group, your opens 5 emails a month but hasn't purchased. Well, let's maybe send them a really good discount because obviously they're interested, but we just haven't gotten them to a point, where they're willing to try or buy, right? And you don't want to send that email to everybody. You would just send to that segment because these other people are going to purchase at some point, right? So it doesn't make sense. So there's a lot of different ways you can go. I like to break it up into engagement levels of how often are they opening, how often are they clicking, and when are they purchased. And that can kind of be a framework for promotions, sales, different types of content, and things like that later. And then obviously you can also do it based off of, hey, if you have a clothing brand, maybe they're interested in men's clothing or women's clothing, or if you have a nutrition, company, maybe they're interested in, protein powder, maybe they're interested in fat loss pills, something like that. So that's kind of more customizable stuff to your brand, but the engagement tiers are kind of what we call them, kind of can be set up across the board with some variations.
And you can sort of tell if you're listening to what Dean's saying, right? Like it just makes sense, right? Like it's not rocket science in terms of the overall way you should be communicating, right? You should be talking to your customers like you would if you knew them one-on-one or they're coming to a store, right? But it's really about utilizing the tool and utilizing the segmentations to make sure you're having the right conversations with the right people. And when you do this correctly, that's when you start to see some really strong metrics. So, for example, if you feel like your open rates in your emails are just really low, right? And we hear this all the time. It's like, man, our open rates are at 15% or it's 16 or 17%. It's probably because you're not segmenting your list correctly, right? You're not sending the right content to the right people at the right time. So if you're utilizing if you're writing really good content and you have really good products and you've got a list and you're segmenting it, you should be seeing anywhere from 20 to 40% open rates on those emails, with your manual campaigns typically being probably more in that 20 to 30% range, and your flows being probably more like 30 to 40%. And then same thing with your percentage of revenue. So if you're looking at your overall revenue that's being driven from email, if you have your automations firing really well and you've got your manual campaign set up and you're doing 8 to 10 a month and you're doing strong segmentations of that list, you should be seeing anywhere from at least 20%, in some cases upwards of 50% of your revenue coming from email. The sweet spot we typically look for is right around 30% is typically a really strong number. 50%, you're probably not doing enough to drive cold traffic into your site, because that's probably pulling that, there's emails too much of what your revenue is coming from.
Yeah, a little skewed.
A little skewed, right? But so 30% is really sort of the sweet spot we typically look for. And you can see here sort of 2 examples. We pulled this data from a couple anonymous accounts. This is actually, if you guys are familiar with Klaviyo, it's our favorite email marketing tool out there. And this is the dashboard of Klaviyo. And you can actually see a breakdown of what your revenue would look like between flows and campaigns as it adds up to total revenue from email. So if you look at the numbers, you can see total revenue, which would be store revenue, in this case, 21,000 for the month. email would be 5,000, and flows 147, with campaigns being 5,000, right? So you can see that in this case, flows only equal about 1%. These guys are driving 24% of their revenue through campaigns, which means there's a huge opportunity here to grow revenue from their automated flows. Same thing of store B. These guys are a little bit larger. These guys are doing close to $1 million a month in revenue, with 26% of their revenue coming from email. But in this case, the split is a little more equal. There's probably a little room to grow here on the flow side. But you can see that the split is closer to 12% of the revenue coming from flows and 15% of the revenue coming from campaigns.
Yeah, and that's typical, right? When you have a really solid email program, like these guys, I would say are pretty solid. And I would imagine some months they're above 30 and maybe some months they're just under, depending on the season, right? Black Friday is going to skew all your numbers. Christmas is going to skew your numbers for the most part. The risk and kind of the opportunity in the store A is that, let's say you get these flows up and running and you start collecting that data. If you go all the way back to the segmentation, you can actually create in most email programs custom Facebook audiences for those specific segments, where you can hit them with targeted email campaigns and targeted Facebook ads, right? So they're way more likely to buy. I think I've read some stats where if they receive an email and see an ad in the same day, they're like 40% more likely to buy, on that day. And so if you are doing the flows right, your total revenue will just naturally increase without you really doing much, right? But if you start to utilize those segments, not just in email, but in other areas, as sort of advanced tactics, like that's where you start to see where this guy could go, and become this guy down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll talk about sort of this idea of multi-tiered nurturing on another day, utilizing email and ads in the same nurturing path, because we could talk for an hour about it, but it's really powerful stuff. And I won't talk too long about this because Dean sort of mentioned it, but one of the main things is as your list size does start to grow, one of your big sort of risks is going to be keeping you out of the spam folder. And if you're growing a list to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100,000 people on your list, and you're still sending emails to that entire list about segmenting, you're going to start finding that your open rates are dropping. From this quote literally came from, internally from the team at Klaviyo, that if your campaign open rates are anywhere from, 10 to 15%, you're probably doing something wrong, which means you're often sending to those unengaged customers or people just aren't interested. And it means that a certain percentage of those emails are most likely falling into your spam folder. So,
and to add on to that, it's really, really hard to get back from that.
Yes.
Right. It can take anywhere from 90 days to 6 months to see your open rates healthy again. Right. So you may have to completely just shut your list down if you've got under 10%, and kind of start over. So that's something you want to avoid for sure.
And it starts with getting those foundational baseline flows right and getting your segments right and really monitoring your open rates and making sure that people are engaging with your emails. So that you're building a healthy list and you've got a healthy email strategy in place. So that's what's going to keep you out. For most brands that are scaling to multiple seven figures, email can be $1 million plus asset for them. And if you lose that asset, that's a hit to your business. So this is something that, especially as you scale, is something to keep in mind and make sure you're monitoring, because it can be really costly if you get it wrong. So let's give you guys, we've got a couple minutes left here. So let's give you guys some really actionable takeaways, so that you guys can take not only just the knowledge of the lifecycle email marketing strategy that we've laid out for you, but also some things that you can start doing literally today with your manual campaigns or even your automations if you have those set up. So what I want to do is let Dean here talk just a little bit about subject lines and give you some of his suggestions and best practices for writing really strong subject lines.
Yeah, and there's a lot of information out there that you can gather, right? If you just search, subject line examples. But there's a few core items that I like to pay attention to, right? One is people are going mobile, right? I've answered probably 15 emails today on my own phone, and keeping it short, which means under 120 characters, is ideal, right? People are going to either read it and open it, or they're just going to delete it immediately. Keep it simple and concise. People are getting more emails than ever now, and they're smart, right? You're not going to trick someone into opening an email. And if they do open it, they're going to delete it. right? And then maybe mark you as spam or unsubscribe you. So I just say like tell them exactly what you're sending to them, and keep it simple, keep it concise. In my opinion, don't use trickery or things like that. Another thing is, it's not just the subject line, but it's the whole way the email appears in the inbox, which if you have a from email, right, you want to make sure it's maybe a name like, Alan@bluestout.com versus like reply2@bluestout.com. Right.
Right.
You could, or even something like help or sales or, something like that, but just make sure it's an email address like people can actually reply to, because you will get some emails coming in from people that are interested in products, and that's just how they communicate. The pre-header is just as important as a subject line. And that's the little bit of grayed text, if you have like Gmail or Outlook, that appears right under the subject line. That can be the call to action, or like the thing that like gets people to click. Like you could have, welcome to, company X, and under it should say something like 10% off your first order, right? That gets someone to click if they're interested. And then urgency, especially where it makes sense. So again, people are getting more emails than ever, and they know if an email is legitimate in terms of, is this actually a timed offer? Or are they just saying this to try and get me to click? Is it clickbait, et cetera? So if you're going to have urgency, make sure it's in a spot that makes sense. I keep bringing up Black Friday, Cyber Monday, because that's, coming up in a couple of weeks, but that's where it would make sense. A holiday is where it would make sense. Or if you're going to run out of product, right? That's kind of where it would make sense as well. But at the end of the day, keep it simple, be very straightforward, and make sure you're telling them exactly what they're going to open, and that'll protect your list in the long run, as well as get you good open rates.
Yeah, I love it. And then to go along with that, just a couple quick pointers on design. And we've harped on this a couple of times in sort of the last 20 minutes or so, but when you're building out your templates for your campaigns and your automations, you got to keep it mobile friendly. Everybody is opening up and at least scanning their inboxes through their phone early morning, on the way to work, over lunch, whatever it might be, right, on their daily commute. You've got to keep it mobile friendly, or you're going to be missing out on a huge percentage of your list, just not interacting at all. So keep it mobile friendly, keep it really clean. The thing about mobile is that you don't have a lot of room. So you've got to keep the design really clean and really impactful. And you want to keep that CTA, by CTA we mean call to action, above the page fold, just like an example we've got over here on the left-hand side. And then just as a sort of a technical build, don't place text over your images if you can help it. And we see a lot of brands that, they want to have a certain type of text to match their branding and font to match the branding. And so they'll put that specific, font designed into an image. The problem is there's still a lot of sort of email accounts out there that will strip out imagery, things like Outlook. And so by doing that, you end up really reducing the amount of content that somebody's going to see. And if all you have is images in that template, then it's just going to pull all those out, and it's really just not going to be compelling for somebody that's opening up in one of those email type accounts. So don't place text over images, and keep your design really simple and mobile friendly. So what I would do is, if you guys are looking for some takeaways, subject lines and design are a great way to see some quick wins while you're working on building out your more advanced lifecycle marketing strategy and starting to get your automations in place. So a quick, I promise you guys, we can show you guys a free opportunity. So what we've done is for everybody who's watching this webinar and this training with BigCommerce, what we've done is we've actually offered up some time on our calendar to do a deep dive in your business. And this is a totally free, we call these strategy session calls, and we'll set aside anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes to learn about your business. We'll dig into the numbers. We'll dig into how the site's performing. We'll talk about what you're doing on email. What are you sending? How are your manual campaigns performing? Have you set up any automations? What do they look like? How are they performing? What percentage of revenue are you driving from them? And we'll dig into them and do an assessment and help you understand what you should do to optimize them further. Do you need to build out more automations? Are you not driving enough email through those automations? How many emails are you sending through your manual campaign strategy? What do your open rates look like? Are you in danger of getting those emails in the spam folder? And what can you do to sort of reduce that risk? So if you have any of those questions, or if anything here was compelling and you have questions about how you could set this up specifically for your brand, your product, and your customers, just go to this URL here. It's bluestout.com/strategy. I guess that's a /strategy. bluestout.com/strategy. There's a calendar there. And so again, anybody who's on the training and wants to set up a strategy session call, feel free to do so. And we'll give you some advice that you can take and start implementing into your business today. Dean, anything else to add to it?
Nope, that was great. And can't wait to hear from some of you guys.
Yeah, guys. And reach out to, if you have any questions, just head over to bluestout.com, drop us a note. Love to hear from you guys. And hope you enjoyed the training. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Commerce Lab. To connect with myself or the team here at Blue Stout, visit us at bluestout.com. To join a community of like-minded e-commerce entrepreneurs and other brand owners just like you, join the Commerce Lab official community on Facebook or visit us at thecommercelab.com.